I discovered I was part of a secret genetic experiment, and now I'm fighting for my life. Reddit stories. I guess it all started the day my uncle died, although back then I didn't know it would unravel everything. He was just Uncle Paul. Quiet, polite, always smelling faintly of varnish and old leather. He lived alone in the white cottage across from the river, the one with the big red maple in the yard that turned to fire every October. When he passed, it wasn't dramatic. Heart failure? Peaceful mother cried softly. My father cleared his throat more than usual, and I was tasked, being the eldest grandchild, with helping clean out his house. That's where everything began, inside a dusty room no one had entered for years. I remember the smell before I even saw anything. Cedar, age, something metallic. Uncle Paul was a piano tuner, one of those rare people who could listen to a note and name the exact scent it was off. His house was filled with the ghosts of keys. Even though no one had played the upright piano in years, it sat in the parlor like a priest guarding secrets. The sun hit it at the wrong angle when I pulled the curtain back, highlighting a thin crack along the lid. Out of impulse, I sat down and lifted the bench, just to see, just in case. And there it was, a yellowed envelope tucked beneath old sheet music, sealed with my name in oven handwriting. No stamp, no date, just one word written on the front. Red. That envelope felt heavier than it should have. I must have stared at it for a full minute before I opened it. The paper inside was delicate, almost brittle, and the handwriting was definitely Uncle Paul's. But what it said was the first blow to everything I thought I knew. You are not who you think you are. The thing about families is, we assume stability. That what we see is what there is. Parents love, siblings bicker, grandparents spoil. We carry that image through birthdays and vacations and hospital visits. I had always thought our family was, well, typical. Flawed, but normal. But after that letter, normal felt like a lie someone told me and forgot to take back. Uncle Paul wrote about my mother, his sister, in ways I had never heard before. About a falling out that no one mentioned. About a child once lost. About a name change. He wrote about my birth certificate and a hospital in another city, a date that didn't match the one I celebrated every year. He said I needed to go to the attic, that everything else was there. Photos, records. Truth, I didn't tell anyone. Not then. Instead, I made an excuse to come back the next day alone. I lied to my parents and said I left my phone charger. I knew they wouldn't check. They were too busy fighting over who would handle the estate. So I climbed the narrow staircase to the attic, heart pounding louder with every creaking step. It was all there, just like the letter said. A shoebox inside, a chest beneath a faded quilt. Inside were documents. Birth records. A photo of my mother holding a baby with a man I didn't recognize, and a hospital ID tag with my name on it, but not my birthday. 3 weeks off. 3 weeks. That might not sound like much to most people, but to me it cracked open 100 questions that had nowhere to go. My mother had always been protective. Not in a sweet, careful way, more in the don't ask too many questions way. Growing up, I had always assumed she was just strict. Now, I wasn't so sure. That night, I went home, pulled out my own birth certificate from the drawer where we kept passports and paperwork. Everything matched what was in the attic except one thing. On the certificate in our house, her name wasn't listed as the mother. It was blank. I didn't sleep. Not that night. I stayed up looking at the documents, flipping through them again and again like somehow the words would change or make more sense. In one of the letters, Paul wrote, "She wanted to protect you, but lies are just slow poisons." That line stuck in my brain, looping. Lies are just slow poisons. Was I poisoned? Was she? The next morning, I confronted her. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I asked her point blank, "Who am I?" At first, she didn't answer. She just stared at me like I was a ghost, or like she was seeing me for the first time. Then she said something that shattered whatever foundation I had left. "You were never supposed to know." That's when she told me about my real mother, her cousin, who had me at 16 and left the country 6 months later. No one had heard from her since. My mother, well, the woman who raised me, adopted me quietly with my father, passed me off as their biological child, and burned the old documents. Or so she thought. Uncle Paul had saved what she tried to erase. I should have felt grateful, I guess. Loved, raised in safety. But all I felt was betrayal. For 16 years, I believed a story that wasn't mine. Every birthday, every family dinner, every bedtime story was layered over a lie. I started to see things differently. How my mother's eyes never quite matched mine. How she always dodged questions about pregnancy. How my father changed the subject when people joked about how much I resembled Mum. Still, I wasn't ready to hate her. Not yet. Instead, I became obsessed. I needed to find the woman who gave birth to me. I needed to know why she left. I needed to hear it from her. It was like a switch flipped in my brain, and the only way to turn it off was to follow the breadcrumbs. And Paul, in his quiet, methodical way, had left just enough for me to start. Her name was Marianne. The name was familiar in the vague way of forgotten relatives mentioned at weddings. I searched for her online, but it was like chasing smoke. The last known address was in Budapest, a phone number disconnected. No social media, no recent records. But I wasn't giving up. I emailed embassies, joined genealogy forums, contacted adoption agencies. I even wrote to local newspapers in Hungary. Weeks passed, then a month. I almost gave up, until one day a letter arrived. No return address, postmarked from Prague. Inside was a single sentence written in looping handwriting. Stop looking. Some truths are better left buried. That was when things really started to unravel. The letter didn't scare me, it fueled me. I scanned it for fingerprints, examined the paper, even tried to track the handwriting using an app. Nothing came up. But the tone of it, calm, cold, and threatening, wasn't what I expected from a mother. It didn't sound like regret. It sounded like a warning, which raised a new, chilling question: what was she hiding? I decided to retrace every step Paul had written about. He'd mentioned a safety deposit box at a local bank, and though it took some convincing, I managed to gain access. Inside was another envelope, this one labeled, "If they find you first, burn this." Not exactly comforting. Inside were more photos. Some from the 80s, some from the early 2000s. All of them featured a man with jet black hair and piercing eyes. In one, he's standing next to Marianne. In another, he's holding a baby. Me, on the back, written in pen. He doesn't know. I started having dreams. In them I was running down a hallway that never ended, doors slamming behind me, lights flickering above. Every time I turned a corner, I saw my reflection, older, twisted, but always with the same black eyes. His eyes. I didn't know who was, but someone out there did. Someone who knew things even Paul didn't write down. And I was determined to find them, even if it meant unearthing more than just secrets. Because in this family, truth wasn't just buried, it was locked away. And I was the key someone had tried to throw into the river. When I stepped outside that day, holding the envelope from the safety deposit box, the wind hit me like it knew something I didn't. It cut through my coat, a chill that didn't belong to the season. It wasn't winter yet, but something in the air felt hollow, like the world was tilting ever so slightly off axis. I took the long way home, walking past the church where my parents were married, the library I used to go to as a kid, the old bakery that still smelled like cinnamon and flour. All of it suddenly seemed unreal, like a model town someone had built for me and forgotten to tell me was fake. I didn't tell anyone about the photos, not even my closest friends. It felt like this secret belonged to a different version of me, one that didn't quite exist anymore. The man in the pictures haunted me. The way he looked at the baby, meek, wasn't casual. It was intense, focused. But there was something else, something I didn't notice right away. In the photo where he's holding me, his wrist has a small tattoo, almost faded, a symbol I'd never seen before. It looked like a circle cut in half by a jagged line. I scanned it into my phone and ran it through image search engines. Nothing. It wasn't military, wasn't gang-related, wasn't cultural. or at least not publicly known. That symbol gnawed at me. I kept digging. I started staying up late, drinking too much coffee, letting school assignments pile up. I became obsessed. My browser was full of conspiracy theory forums, obscure genealogy websites, digitized city archives. Every night I combed through newspaper clippings and blurry public records, chasing the name Marianne across 2 decades and 3 countries. I created a corkboard in my closet like in those crime dramas. Strings, notes, photos. My room became a shrine to a life I was never supposed to know. And then something shifted. I was digging through Paul's old record player one evening, checking the lining of its velvet drawer, when I found it a cassette tape, unlabeled. I don't even own a cassette player, but Paul did. A dusty old stereo in his bedroom still worked. I popped the tape in, half expecting music. Instead, it clicked twice and then crackled into a voice. Paul's voice. He sounded tired, slower than I remembered, and what he said made my blood run cold. If you're hearing this, you've already gone too far. I tried to bury it deep enough you wouldn't look. But you did. That man in the photos, his name is Anton. He's dangerous. He's not just your biological father. He's the reason your mother disappeared. The reason Marianne ran. I paused the tape. My chest felt tight. I rewound it and played again, letting it sink in. Anton, a name. Finally. But dangerous. How? Why? The voice continued. Back then, in 707, she tried to leave him. He was involved in something. I still don't know everything. But it wasn't just criminal. It was organized. Global. Something called Divide. I know how it sounds. Like a cult or a network. But it was real. She got out. Barely. You were just a baby. She dropped you on our doorstep, said, "Keep him safe," and vanished. I don't think she ever meant to come back. I didn't sleep at all that night. I started researching Anton Radek. The name returned almost nothing online, just one blurry article from an old Hungarian business journal dated 2004. Anton Radek, biotech investor and CEO of the now defunct Novogenics, has declined further comment on the closure of his company following the arrest of its co-founder. That was it. No photos. No social media. No obituary. He had gone off-grid, but Novogenics rang a bell. I dug deeper. Turns out Novogenics had once partnered with universities on genetic research, gene mapping, behavioral epigenetics. They claimed to be working on predictive DNA. But then, abruptly, everything disappeared. The company was shut down. No official explanation. Conspiracies abounded. Some said it was money laundering. Others whispered about human trials gone wrong. I started to realize the truth wasn't just a family matter anymore. I needed help, but not from my parents, not yet. Instead, I reached out to someone unexpected. Miss Langford, my biology teacher. She was sharp, no nonsense, with a knack for patterns. I told her I was doing an independent research project on gene studies in Eastern Europe. She raised an eyebrow but agreed to help. Within a week, she found something. A restricted paper from 2006, archived but accessible through a university login. It mentioned Novogenics. And in the acknowledgments, there it was again, the symbol. That same jagged circle. It was labeled as Project Helixa Divida, Phase 2 PAW. That night, I knew one thing: I needed to find Anton. Not just for closure. For survival. I traced a possible lead through a Hungarian journalistic collective. An anonymous blog claimed Anton Radek had re-emerged in Prague under a new identity. I emailed the blogger. No reply. Then, 2 nights later, I found my bedroom window cracked open. I don't open my window, ever. On my desk was a single object, a coin. European. Obsolete. But etched crudely into the metal was that same symbol. No note, no name, just the coin. It wasn't a warning. It was a message. I packed a bag. Passport, cash burner, phone. I told my parents I was going on a school trip. I lied again. At this point, the lies came easier than the truth. I landed in Prague 3 days later, jet-lagged and wired. I stayed in a hostel under a fake name. The blogger, whoever they were, finally responded. A short email. He attends the Thursday markets near NM Republiki. Uses the name Carl. Wears gloves. Doesn't speak. That Thursday, I went to the market. It was raining lightly. I wandered for 2 hours, scanning every face, every hand. Finally, I saw him, the man from the photo, older now, gray at the temples, still with the eyes. Piercing. Focused. He stood at a stall selling rare books, fingers gloved, posture rigid. I approached, not sure what I would say. But before I could, he looked up, his eyes landed on mine, and he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was knowing. Cold. I froze. He leaned slightly closer and whispered, "You're not the only one searching." Then he turned and walked away. I followed him for blocks, through alleys and across tram lines. But he was fast, trained, even. I lost him in the crowd near the train station. When I returned to my hostel, the door was ajar. Someone had gone through my things. Nothing was stolen, but the coin was gone. I knew then I was being watched, tracked, maybe even followed back home. But the worst realization was this: I wasn't just unraveling a family mystery. I had entered something else, a network, a silence that stretches across cities and years. Something ancient, perhaps, or at least deeply rooted. When I finally flew back home, nothing felt the same. My parents looked older. The house felt smaller. The piano in Paul's room was gone, donated by then. But the bench remained. I opened it again. This time, I found one last item wedged in the lining. A small metal key with a tag, "Library." I returned to the town library the next morning. I asked the librarian if Paul had a locker or deposit box. She hesitated, then checked. One safe box remained under his name, unopened for years. Inside was a manuscript, not just any manuscript. It was titled, The Divide, a Personal History. It wasn't fiction, and on the last page was a single line. "If you're reading this, the blood in your veins is older than you think." The manuscript felt heavy in my hands. Not in weight, but in consequence. It wasn't bound, just clipped together with a rusty fastener. The pages yellowed slightly at the edges. Paul's handwriting appeared on the cover in bold, block letters, underlined twice. The Divide, a Personal History. It didn't look like a story. It looked like a confession. I sat down at a table in the library's basement reading room, the kind that smells like damp paper and dust, and started reading, knowing my life would fracture even further by the time I reached the final page. The first line punched through my chest. "My name is Paul Ashcroft, and I helped build the system that broke your family." He began in 1986. Back then, he was just out of university, hired by a pharmaceutical start-up in Budapest. It was supposed to be a temporary job, data management for clinical trials. But almost immediately, he realized the trials were only a fraction of what was being studied. Behind locked doors and secured computers was something else, a project called The Divide. No one explained it openly. But there were whispers in corridors, strange acronyms in memos, and biological samples labeled with numbers instead of names. Then came the Type 7 files. Paul wasn't supposed to see them. But late one night, during a database migration, he stumbled across a folder buried deep in the server encrypted files, decrypted only by a glitch in the timestamp. Inside were logs, experiments on infants, brain scans, behavioral recordings, sleep monitoring. There were notes on selective coding, a term he'd never heard before, and worse, outlines of protocols for mental imprinting before the age of 3. Most of the children were from orphanages or listed as voluntary surrogates. He never saw surnames, just batches. One batch was marked X7MM. That was me. Paul didn't know it at the time. He only found out much later, after Marianne came to him, eyes wild, her hair hacked short, clutching me in her arms. She had taken me from a compound near Lake Balaton, broke through a secured medical facility in the middle of the night. He helped her disappear. He forged papers, moved funds, and when she said she had to leave, said she couldn't risk being followed. He agreed to raise me in silence. That was the arrangement. She would run. Paul would hide the child. The organization would think she destroyed the baby. But she hadn't. I was safe as far as they knew. Until now. Paul's manuscript continued, diving deeper into the group behind it all. The Divide wasn't just a project. It was a philosophy, a belief that genetic divergence would determine the future of civilization. They saw the world as a tree and believed it was time to prune the weak branches. Their goal: create a select generation, bred not only for physical and intellectual advantage, but emotional detachment. Empathy, they believed, was inefficient. Emotion was a flaw. The children of Divide would be different. They weren't raised. They were programmed, and one of them, Anton Radek, had survived the first phase and risen to lead the second. Anton wasn't just a former CEO. He was a result, a product of the first human trials, one of the originals. And when the program faltered under pressure and exposure, he didn't let it die. He buried it, restructured it, and moved it through private shells across Europe. The biotech front was a cover. Beneath it lay something much darker: controlled breeding, gene editing, behavioral conditioning. Some participants went missing. Others returned altered. Paul believed Anton was trying to finish what the original scientists had failed to achieve: the complete separation of human advancement from human morality. And I had been part of it. I stared at the manuscript's last pages, hands trembling. Paul had known, for years, and he'd never told me. He left me breadcrumbs instead of truth. Because he was afraid, because if he said it out loud, someone would come knocking. And now, they probably were. I took the papers, folded them into my jacket, and walked home through sleet that felt like pins against my face. I didn't feel cold. I felt hollow. A human-shaped gap in reality. Every memory was now suspect. Every hug, every bedtime story, every photo on the wall. None of it felt real anymore. That night, I tried to confront my mother again. She didn't deny it. She just stared at me, pale, small in the kitchen light, and said, "I thought they'd forgotten. I thought they believed you were gone." I asked her what Marianne had told her, what she knew. She looked down. "Enough to be afraid forever." That was the last full sentence she said. Because that night, someone broke into our house. No smashed window, no forced door, just silence. I woke up to the alarm blinking but not sounding. It had been disabled. My laptop was gone. The shoebox from Paul's attics, gone. Even the coin, and taped to my bedroom mirror, in the exact center, was a printed photo. A photo of me, walking in Prague, looking over my shoulder. Whoever took it had been close. Attached was a note typed in sharp courier font. "We gave you a name. You should have left it buried." That's when I knew they weren't trying to stop me. They were trying to observe me, study me. I wasn't a threat. I was an experiment reactivated. The next day, a stranger showed up at school. Said he was a guidance counselor from the district. But he wasn't on the staff list. He wore a cheap suit and had no ID. He asked me odd questions about memory, emotion, how I handled stress. When I pressed, he smiled and said, "We're just trying to understand how you're developing." Developing. I left school early. I ran. That week I stayed off-grid. No phone. No cards. I slept in a storage unit Paul once rented under a fake name. Inside was a duffel bag with burner phones, old bills, and a flash drive labeled, "For when they come back." The files were heavily encrypted. It took me 3 days, a borrowed laptop, and a cracked decryption tool to open them. Inside were dossiers, dozens unlike me. XLRMM was just one series. There were others, W2FR9K, L3J. Each file contained tracking notes, psychological assessments. The behavioral models, they didn't call us names. They called us prototypes. Under mine, there was a line that sent ice through my chest. Subject shows incomplete detachment. Signs of residual empathy. Instability probable. I wasn't failing at being normal. I was failing at being what they wanted me to be. A weapon. That's when I realized something even darker. I wasn't supposed to live a normal life. I was supposed to be retrieved. Or terminated. I had a choice to make. Run, hide, or find the others. Because if I was unstable, maybe they were too. Maybe not all of us had gone silent. Maybe someone out there was waiting. Or watching. And maybe, just maybe, we weren't the mistakes of the divide. We were the cracks in their system. We were the proof that the human heart, no matter how buried, refuses to die quietly. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after reading the files on that flash drive. It wasn't just the sheer volume of data. that haunted me. It was the cold precision of it all. Every action I'd taken, every test score from childhood, every abnormal reaction logged by pediatricians or teachers. All of it had been quietly observed, collected, and analyzed. Not by family, not by doctors, but by the remnants of the divide. Somewhere in the shadows, I had always been watched, evaluated, labeled. And I was not alone. Of all the prototype files, one caught my eye. A girl labeled L3J, birth year 2008, codename Juniper. Her file was different. Handwritten notes, irregular scans, strange inconsistencies. At the bottom of her profile, in red ink, one sentence was underlined twice as subject: attempted contact with X7M in 2017. Connection blocked. Risk level elevated. I couldn't remember anyone named Juniper. Not in 2017. Not ever. But I knew what the implication meant. Someone like me had tried to reach out. And someone else had made sure we never connected. That had to change. I scoured the metadata from her file, found a single fragment of location data embedded in an old scanned log. A GPS ping from a hotel Wi-Fi in Edinburgh, Scotland. It was weak, it was years old, but it was all I had. I booked the cheapest ticket I could find with cash. No baggage, no phone, no trace. My mother begged me not to go, and when I refused, she handed me a photo from an old drawer. It was a woman in her 20s with wild, curly black hair holding a baby. Me, she whispered. If you find her, tell her I forgive her. The forgive her. The phrase looped in my head during the flight. As soon as I landed, the rain met me like it had been waiting. It soaked through my hood and jacket in seconds, painting the cobblestones with that slick, cold shine unique to Scottish autumns. I made my way to the hotel from the file. St. Magnus Inn, an old converted chapel now used for cheap student lodging. I booked a room on the same floor Juniper had once stayed on. The receptionist didn't ask for ID, a miracle. That night, I waited in silence, scouring local internet cafes for any trace of her name. I tried every variant: L3J Juniper, even her original surname pulled from a buried file. Jasinska. Nothing. Then I thought to check the deep web forums Paul had bookmarked on his old laptop. That's where I found it. A single message posted under a dead thread called Divided No More. Time-stamped 2 weeks earlier. To the others still breathing, I made it out. Name starts with J. You'll know me if you remember the piano and the ash tree. Edinburgh for now. Comb quietly. My heart punched against my ribs. Piano, ash tree. That had to be her. I replied under a masked username, including a photo of the coin that had once been left in my room, hoping she'd recognize the symbol. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally a reply. You took too long. Meet me tomorrow. West Princes Street Gardens. Noon. Bench under the clock tower. Come alone. Wear something red. The next day, I put on the only red thing I owned, a scarf from Paul's closet, and walked into the garden with my heart pounding like a war drum. The city moved around me in slow motion. Pigeons scattered. Tourists laughed. Trams rumbled by. I saw her before she saw me. She was sitting on the bench, head down, earbuds in. Her hair was shorter than the photos. Black leather jacket, boots scuffed, fingers tapping a strange rhythm on her knee. She looked up when I sat down beside her. Her eyes were dark, alert. The kind of eyes that measured everything. You're real, she whispered. So are you, I said. We didn't speak for a full minute after that. Just sat in silence. Then she handed me a folded piece of paper. They killed my sister, she said flatly. She was in the Bew series. 2 months ago. Car crash, they said. But it wasn't. She had the same files you had, same tracking, same symbol. I unfolded the paper. It was a map. Drawn meticulous. It showed a compound in Norway. Deep forest. No roads in. A red X over a cluster of buildings. She pointed at it. That's where they still test. Not officially. Off. Grid. Disconnected from everything? But the signals are there. I've been tracing energy pings. Microwave pulses. Underground servers. The program's not dead. It's sleeping. I couldn't breathe. How do you know all this? She looked at me like I'd just asked her how to walk. Because I was one of them. She told me everything. She had escaped at 12. snuck out through a medical waste tunnel after setting off a smoke bomb in the east wing of their training facility. Her escape was supposed to be impossible, but her twin sister, L3K, had helped her. Bought her enough time, took the punishment afterward. Juniper had spent 5 years off the grid, stealing identities, forging documents, hacking whatever she needed. She had no illusions about survival. "The moment you exist outside their control," she said, "you're already a target." She had one goal now: expose them, and she needed my help. "I'm not like you," I said, unsure whether it was shame or fear in my voice. "No," she replied. "You're worse, because you grew up thinking you were normal, which means they'll come after you harder." We spent the next 3 days underground. Literally. An abandoned subway tunnel system beneath Edinburgh that Juniper had turned into her bunker. Battery-powered lights, a mattress on crates, a row of burner phones, each connected to a different alias. It was there that she showed me the master file, something she called the ledger. It was a list: names, locations, code results, dozens of them, maybe more. Some were marked, completed, some terminated. Some, too many, were blank, and one was marked, activated. My name, she explained the stages: identification, isolation, conditioning, activation. Arashar, I was one step from the final stage. "I think they're testing your threshold," she said. "See how far you'll go before you snap. If you stay stable, you're useful. If not," she ran a finger across her throat. We knew we had no time left, so we made a plan. Infiltrate the compound, copy the hard drives, download the original Divide protocols, leak them globally, airdrop to journalists, upload to encrypted archives, shatter the legacy. They built us like machines, Juniper whispered one night, eyes reflecting the pale tunnel light. "But we're not. You still dream, don't you?" I did. In my dreams I saw fire, broken mirrors, and Anton, always Anton. We left Edinburgh 3 days later using forged documents, rented a rusted camper van, and drove through Denmark into Norway, stopping only for fuel and silence. The forests grew darker, roads narrower, trees closed in like sentinels. By the time we reached the coordinates, it was snowing lightly. The compound was real, fenced, silent, hidden in the valley. No lights on the exterior, but the warmth sensors on Juniper's scanner lit up like a beacon. People were inside. We waited until midnight. Juniper hacked the fence's outdated system with a bypass pulse. We crawled through the underbrush, hearts sensed like twin drums, found the back door. Old access panel, still used biometric locks. She handed me a glove. "Paul left you something," she whispered. Inside the glove was a microprint, a fragment of Paul's thumbprint stored in the lining. I placed it on the scanner. Green light. Door clicked. Inside it was colder than the snow. Sterile hallways, gray walls. Smell of iodine and copper. Every step felt like walking into a childhood I'd never lived, but had been meant for me. Juniper led us to the data room. 3 drives, each the size of a book. We copied everything. But before we could leave, the lights shut off, and the speakers clicked on. Then a voice, his voice. "You made it home, my son." But for a moment, the world froze. The voice didn't echo, didn't boom. It was quiet, controlled, almost gentle. But it reached something deep inside me, something ancient and instinctual. It wasn't just the words that made my stomach twist. It was that I recognized the voice. Not from memory, but from dreams, from the static-soaked nightmares that had haunted me for months. "You made it home, my son." Juniper went still beside me. Her hand hovered over the data drive, lips pressed into a razor-thin line. We exchanged no words. None were needed. We had seconds. She grabbed the drives. I grabbed the crowbar we'd used to pry open the cabinet. The emergency lights buzzed to life, low red glows lining the corridor, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then the sound of footsteps. Not rushed, not chaotic, methodical. I moved to the hallway, weapon raised, blood burning under my skin. Juniper disappeared around the corner with the drives, retracing our route to the rear exit. We had planned for separation, but nothing prepares you for standing alone in a hallway built for ghosts. He stepped into view 5 seconds later. Anton, older now, grayer, but tall, composed. Those same eyes, black as glass, unreadable, reflecting everything and nothing. He didn't wear a lab coat or tactical gear, just a black turtleneck and gloves, like someone prepared for a piano recital rather than confrontation. His presence filled the hallway like smoke. I should have run, but I didn't. My legs refused. He raised a hand, not threatening, like a priest giving a benediction. "You were always meant to return," he said. "The others, the failed branches. But you, X7M, you've always been stable." I gripped the crowbar tighter. "I'm not your project," I said, trying to make my voice steady. "I'm not your anything." A small, clinical smile. "That's where you're wrong. You are more me than you are her. Marianne was never meant to raise you. She didn't understand the potential. She saw danger where I saw evolution." I stepped back. "She saw a child. You saw a tool." He nodded slowly. "Tools build futures. Empathy builds history. One gets remembered, the other repeats itself." Behind me, the hallway lights pulsed brighter. Then, a distant pop. Juniper triggering one of the smoke capsules we'd stashed in the vents. The alarm hadn't gone off yet, but that didn't matter. Anton didn't move. He simply stared at me as if calculating the moment to act. "Come with me," he said softly. "You've seen the world outside, the chaos, the noise. But here, we build something cleaner, purposeful. You felt it, didn't you? The hunger for clarity. That was programmed in you for a reason." I almost believed him. That's the terrifying part. Because he wasn't wrong. The chaos had felt unbearable. The deception, the cracks in reality, the feeling that none of it fit. But that wasn't because I belonged here. It was because they had tried to shape me to never belong anywhere else. I swung the crowbar. Not at him. At the glass control panel beside the hallway door, sparks flew. An alarm screamed to life. Red lights flashed. Doors began to seal. Anton flinched. Not in fear, but irritation. "That was a mistake," he said, voice devoid of emotion now. I ran. Down the side corridor, past a locked lab, past a window where I caught a glimpse of something far worse. Children, maybe 8 or 9 inside a sterile room, silent, still, watching me, their eyes blank. That was the future he promised. That was the evolution. Juniper met me at the northern fence. Blood on her arm. A shallow cut. She didn't speak, just shoved one of the drives into my bag, then lit a magnesium flare and threw it behind us. The resulting flash lit up the forest in a violent white burst. We ducked, sprinted into the snow, hearing only one sound behind us, a single gunshot. We didn't stop. We ran until our lungs split open and our bones froze. By the time we reached the Rendezvous point, a civilian airstrip half a day's walk through the forest, we were ghosts of ourselves, clothes soaked, skin raw. But we drivers, the truth, and one name spoken into the darkness. Anton had called me his son. That truth itched beneath my ribs like a parasite. If he was my biological father, then everything Paul said was true. Marianne hadn't just fled danger, she had fled him. Because he wasn't a man, he was a design. Back in London, we contacted a trusted whistleblower site, one Paul had bookmarked in the same folder as the decryption keys. They agreed to receive and publish the data anonymously. We uploaded the files from a dozen different cafes, jumping between VPNs, encrypting every transfer with 3 layers of randomized ciphers. The story hit the dark net in 12 hours. Mainstream media ignored it, of course. But it spread like wildfire beneath the surface. Biotech forums, whistleblower threads, Reddit conspiracy channels. Everything Paul wrote, everything Juniper endured, everything I had become, it was all there. And one word stood out across every discussion divide. Some said it was a hoax. Others swore they'd heard rumors for years. One post chilled me more than all the others. It was only 5 words. X7M is still alive. No username. No reply. Just the post. I stared at it for an hour. And then Juniper said something I'll never forget. "This won't stop them, but it's the first crack in the glass." And it was. The next day, we received a package, no return address, wrapped in wax paper. Inside was a music box, carved wood, hand-painted top. A red maple tree etched onto the lid. I opened it. It played a lullaby. One I recognized. I didn't know how, but I'd heard it in my sleep. Inside the lid, carved in small, careful letters, "We weren't the first. We won't be the last. But we're no longer alone." I looked at Juniper. She was already on her laptop decrypting a new list. New prototypes. New survivors. Some marked missing. Some marked activated. One marked eliminated. L3K, her sister. Juniper didn't cry. She just stared, jaw clenched, fire behind her eyes. "I want them to be afraid now," she said. "We made a pact. We run. We wouldn't just leak, we would hunt. Not to kill, but to find. The others. The broken branches. The discarded blueprints. Because we all had one thing in common. We had survived. But more than that, we remembered. And that made us dangerous. We didn't choose to be born into it. The divide was never a place, never a building, never even a file. It was an idea. A disease passed from visionaries too arrogant to consider the cost of their brilliance. But what they failed to understand is that ideas, once exposed to air and pain and time, mutate. And the children they forged in silence grew teeth. The night we found the next one, it was raining again. His name was Elias. Cody R9K, age 16. He'd gone missing from a foster system in Belgium 4 years ago and reappeared in Munich 2 weeks prior. Flagged only because someone uploaded a blurry photo of him to a missing persons forum, and Juniper noticed his eyes. Not the color, the stillness. That unnerving calm shared by too many of us. When we reached him, he didn't run or scream or ask who we were. He just said, "I thought I was the only one." And we told him he wasn't. We told him the truth. And that's when he handed us his phone and said, "They've already found me, and they want me to come back." Inside the phone was a string of encrypted messages from an address tagged simply, "Welcome Thedivide." Net. The tone wasn't threatening. It was warm. Inviting. Like a recruiter welcoming an old intern back to a long, forgotten company. "We're proud of what you've become. You're not alone anymore. We forgive the deviation." Forgive the deviation. That phrase had started appearing more often. In leaked docs, in scraped server logs, in buried network pings across the globe. It had replaced older terms like instability and noncompliance. It was less clinical, more religious. They weren't just trying to build perfect minds anymore. They were forming a belief system, and we were their fallen angels. The next 6 months were a blur of motion. We became phantoms, slipping between cities, cracking into servers with tools Juniper had built out of paranoia and caffeine. Each file we uncovered felt like a time bomb. Each prototype we found was either lost, dead, or waiting to be claimed. We found 12. 8 came with us. 2 refused and vanished again. 2 were already gone. Each one of us carried something different. Scars, nightmares, gaps in memory. One girl, nicknamed Nova L2Hef, had burn marks down both arms from a neurological stimulation trial, performed when she was 5. Another, a boy named Theo M6B, hadn't spoken in 3 years until Juniper played him a distorted clip of the lullaby from the music box. Then he whispered, "Home." But we weren't a family. Not yet. Family implies safety, warmth, a history you choose to carry. What we were was an awakening, and just when we began to believe we could bring it all down, burn the foundation, drown the architects in their own blueprints, we got the video. It was sent to all our burner phones at the same time. 1 minute, 47 seconds. No sender ID, no metadata, just static, and then a girl in a hospital gown, strapped to a chair, eyes closed. Then she opened them. Juniper's breath caught in her throat. No, it was L3K, her sister. Alive? "Hello," she said in the video, voice flat. "If you're watching this, they let me speak. That means you've broken something they want to protect. But they don't hate you. They love you. They created you, and they still have the rest of us. The rest of us." She turned her head. For 1 second, just one, the camera widened to show the room. 7 more children, maybe teenagers, lined in chairs like broken marionettes, eyes closed, machines humming behind them. Then back to her face. She smiled, but it was wrong. Not vacant, not empty. Programmed. "You can't stop it," she whispered. because you're part of it. Then static. The screen went black, and below the video, a final message. Come home, or we bring home to you. We stared at each other in the dark warehouse where we'd made camp for the week. Rain beat down on the tin roof like the seconds ticking toward collapse. What do we do? Elias asked. We find her, Juniper said, voice hollow. I nodded. We go to the source. That night we voted, 9 of us. Unanimous. No more leaks, no more whispers. We strike. We traced the video to its broadcast origin, an underground relay station in Helsinki, cloaked in academic traffic and hidden behind fake university accounts. It took 3 weeks to breach it. And what we found wasn't just a facility, it was a relay node. Part of a network. A web of hidden stations built beneath schools, data centers, clinics, each connected to a larger satellite array called Helix Central. Not military, not corporate. Something new. An organism, and we were inside it. Juniper's face lit up when she found the node access protocol. We can't destroy this, she said. Not yet, but we can infect it. So we did. We wrote our own virus, not one that corrupted, one that revealed. A code that cracked its own encryption and uploaded every hidden log, every data point, every footage clipped directly to hundreds of public mirrors. Open, permanent. We named it Bench Key after the place where Paul had hidden the first letter. When it deployed, it set the world on fire. News broke across continents. Illegal genetic programs exposed. Children raised in secret facilities. Bio, weaponized adolescence. It spread faster than we expected. Too fast. Governments denied involvement. Corporations claimed sabotage and divide. They vanished. No response, no denial, no retaliation. Until the funeral. It was Nova's. She'd been tracking a divide offshoot in Loun, acting alone. She didn't tell us, thought she could handle it. We found her body 2 days later in a train yard. Her heart had stopped. No bruises, no blood. Just silence. And a coin. That same symbol carved into the metal. Our symbol, the jagged circle. But this time there was a new inscription on the edge. There is no end. Only alignment. When we buried her in a field, unmarked, safe, we didn't cry, we couldn't. Not then. But we knew they were back, stronger, smarter. Silent, a new phase. Juniper began building a second network, counterweb of ex-analysts, sympathetic hackers, burned-out security contractors. She called it the Ledger Project. A living archive. Stories. Proof. Patterns. Truth. We trained ourselves. Code. Combat languages. Surveillance. We weren't kids anymore. We were reconstruction. And as for me, I went back to Paul's house once more. Everything was empty. But in the back of the piano bench, hidden beneath the felt lining, I found a photo I'd missed the first time. Me, barely a toddler, reaching toward a camera. Behind me, Marianne, younger, eyes sunken but smiling, and beside her, half out of frame, Anton, his hand on my shoulder. Everyone who saw the photo said the same thing. You look just like him, but they were wrong. I don't look like him. Not anymore. Because I remember Paul. I remember Marianne. I remember that secrets don't just hide in attic boxes or encrypted drives. They hide in blood. And now I carry them forward. Because the truth isn't something you inherit, it's something you build. One broken note at a time, one hidden bench, one forgotten child at a time. Thanks for watching the video, subscribe, and like the video.